For many years now, African democracy seemed like it was here to stay. Though not perfect, African democracies continue to advance amidst applause and greater expectation. The past decade has unfolded a disturbing trend of military coups. This week, the Republic of Guinea has experienced yet another military coup. Kunle Ajibola tells us more.
Democracy began to thrive on the African continent during the 1990s. This is because it was then that donor agencies and world organizations began to show interest in promoting political change and economic reforms on the continent. Donor organizations then began to tie economic and political as well as development support to Africa's political reforms under what was referred to as participatory development, which include democratization, improved governance, issues of corruption, and human rights. The condition that political reform be undertaken is now attached to almost all Western aids, each Western country determining their standard. Yet, regardless of the approach, there is increasingly strong agreement among donors that political reforms in Africa must result in reduced corruption and more financial accountability, better observance of human rights, independent media and an independent judiciary, participatory politics, and a liberalized market economy in order to move closer to the ultimate goal of meaningful economic growth and development. Improved governance, which seems to be the common denominator to enjoy patronage of both bilateral and multilateral aid to African countries, has been defined diversely among different observers and actors concerned with development in Africa. For instance, the World Bank defines governance as the manner in which power is exercised in the management of a country's economic and social resources for development. This definition further emphasizes its concern with efficiency and the capacity of state institutions beyond the public sector to the rules and institutions that create a predictable and transparent framework for the conduct of public and private business, as well as accountability for economic and financial performance. As a result of this new order, Africans acknowledge that development must be revamped by a democratic approach, employing the energy and devotion of African people who alone can make development sustainable. This recognition emerged from the Arusha Conference, Putting the People First, of February 1990, convened under the auspices of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and attended by over 500 delegations representing grassroots organizations, non-governmental organizations, United Nations agencies, and governments. The African Charter for Popular Participation in Development and Transformation, which was adopted by the plenary, holds that the absence of democracy is a principal reason for the persistent development challenges facing Africa. As a result, the 1990s through the year 2000 ushered in a new wave of democratic governance and experience in the various regions of the African continent. However, in recent years, Africa has been witnessing a reversal of fortune in terms of the spread of democratic ideals. Democracy has been bastardized in some countries because of arbitrary tenure elongation, changing of constitutional provisions to support sit-tight syndrome, and in some cases, suspension of the constitution. The continent has witnessed several coups truncating democracy on the continent. The 2020 coup in Mali, attempted coup in the Central African Republic, the coup in Sudan in 2019, Gabon also in 2019, and Chad in 2020, and now Republic of Guinea. What are the factors responsible for this coup and attempted coup? What is the African Union, sub-regional bodies, world organizations, and donor agencies going to do to curb this ugly phenomenon? How can we ensure that we sustain and ensure that democracy continue to thrive on the continent without much ado?
Here to discuss these and other issues with me are Dr. Senayon Olaoluwa. He is the Acting Director of the Institute of African Studies and Pioneer Head of Diaspora and Transnational Studies. His publications have appeared in leading journals including African Affairs, Journal of Contemporary African Studies, Journal of African Cultural Studies, among others. Our second guest is a legal practitioner with multidisciplinary experience in administration, law, corporate communications, public relations, and political consulting. Ikemesit Efyong is Head of Research at SBN Intelligence, an African-focused risk consultancy and Nigeria's foremost geopolitical intelligence firm based in Lagos. Good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
All right. First things first. The first question everybody's asking is, why do we have these issues resurgent again? What is responsible for this very set of ugly incidents that we seem to be having all over again? Doctor, we'll start with you.
Actually, it's a fundamental question you have asked, and we have to get really critical about how we address it. Democracy. Whose democracy in the first place?
Okay.
What we are witnessing since the advent of colonialism is that imposition of the leadership, especially from the second half of the 20th century. Democracy, Western democracy, has been projected as the only model of good governance. And somehow there is a sense in which what we are witnessing also speaks to what I call leadership, the global leadership temporality, that is hinged essentially on neoliberal capitalism. And so, because the West says it is the only way out, we also tend to join the bandwagon. That is that, and we must understand it to that extent. Otherwise, there could have been so many other alternatives. But having agreed that that is the global trend of things, that is the global purpose of things, we also still have to come back to the specific history of Guinea.
Okay.
Guinea has always been a country that is embroiled in a kind of peculiar, if curious, leadership tradition. Since 1958, when it gained its independence under Sekou Touré, you're going to realize that what we have witnessed between 1958 and now has not been in any way radically different. And it does appear that Guinea has become unto itself a kind of country that has invented a predictable leadership tradition.
Okay. All right.
Sekou Touré was, for instance, president from 1958 until 1984.
Yes.
And from there, something was established.
Yes.
The culture of what I call soft coups in Guinea.
All right. Okay. Ikemesit, let's ask you the same question. What do you think is responsible for these set of ugly incidences that we've been seeing?
So I think Dr. Olaoluwa has largely nailed the issue. The standpoint I would approach the conversation from, having the doctor so exhaustively deal with sort of the wider social political picture,
Yes.
will be the economic aspect of it. Guinea, even by African standards, is one of the poorest countries on the continent. It's a mono economy. Its predominant export is bauxite, which is the raw material, which is used to produce aluminum, which you find in your smartphones, in your televisions, and in a wide range of technology-based products. Guinea also does not have a very strong democratic tradition. I think that's the point the doctor was trying to make. So Guinea's only period of democratic rule actually started in 2010 with the election of Alpha Conde, and before that you had a series of military and quasi-military, certainly authoritarian regimes. So if anything, the coup that happened on Sunday is more a return to a quintessentially Guinean type of governance. And when you have a situation where, and this is the case with many African countries, when you have a situation where civilian democracies have become inextricably linked with worsening social and economic indicators, many people will cheer on when a strong man comes in, promising to deal with corruption, promising greater economic goods, and that's what you have seen in Guinea, and you increasingly see a range of African countries, spanning from Guinea, which is on the Gulf of Guinea coast, through Mali, Burkina Faso, and increasingly Niger, on to Chad.
So this is my question now, listening for the arguments both of you have put forward. Is democracy not exactly suited for African countries? Is the problem with the democratic leaders that we've had? We've tried military, we've tried democracy. We are in Nigeria, we don't want to go back to military rule. So is democracy the problem, or is it the issue that the democratic leaders do not put the people first as they swore to do? Ikemesit, let's start with you.
Okay, so I don't think the problem is the system of government, right? My argument would be that both military dictatorships and civilian governments have roundly failed the plurality of Africans throughout the post-independence period. So it's not necessarily about the system, it's really about how we practice it. We have seen authoritarian governments produce, social and economic goods, right, in other parts of the world. We've also seen many democracies do the same thing. So I don't think the problem is the system. I think it's really about the operators. And perhaps critically, in the African context, is the fact that in relative terms, our march to independence, not across the continent, but certainly in West and Central Africa, this is very true for us, and it is for the Guineas and all of our other neighbors within our neck of the woods, is that our march to independence was quite rushed. And so that respect for institution, as well as the building of and the deepening of institutional capacity, didn't exist in many African countries.
Okay.
I remember in my history class, an oft-quoted fact that when the Democratic Republic of the Congo, for example, was granted independence from Belgium in the early 1960s, it only had 25 doctors.
Wow. Wow.
25 doctors for a population of 20 million people. Now that population has quadrupled. Indeed, yes. So that population has quadrupled, and the development of institutional capacity hasn't really kept pace. And you see that in a lot of African countries, and that's certainly true in Guinea, which is that democracies require very strong institutions to serve as arbiters of competing needs.
All right. I'm gonna pause you there. Okay, I'm going to pause you there because I see Doctor responding quite well, and I'm going to ask him the same question. Do you agree with him that the issue we're dealing with is that one of the major foundational issues are that when we got our independence, democratic institutions and capacities were not developed sufficiently enough to push us forward in the pace that we should go?
Absolutely. The barrister has said it all.
Yeah.
You see, the whole idea of democracy in Africa, independent Africa, is a facade, because even the West, the colonial powers from the West, have not been sincere with Africa. It is not about the system of government, but a question of development. Let us go into the history of the Western nations, and you are going to realize that their development model is not an extractive model. It's an industrial model. It's a technological model. But these people come and present to us a facade of governance called democracy, and then leave us to be consigned to extraction. So the whole of the African continent is just a mining site for the Western powers. And for as long as every African country only relies on mining, relies on extraction, we are going to discover that and this is what I have always argued,
Right.
development will be rare and far between. And because it is rare and far between, you discover that we are moving from one crisis to another on the African continent, so that at every point in time, there is probably only one country that all the other African countries will rush to. And what's always the end of it? Xenophobia. And that's the point we are making. African countries, even in the 21st century, even the finest of them, whether you want to say Nigeria in terms of economy, South Africa, you discover that are still reliant only on extraction. And we cannot go far because
with
the
that kind,
leadership itself is taking advantage of that. You just extract what is in the ground. So how will the people hold you accountable?
All right.
And the West ensures that it continues that way. For as long as that continues, I'm afraid we're not getting anywhere. Democracy for me is a facade.
All right, Doctor. We're going to come back and we're going to further interrogate that. And please just be ready. As soon as we get back, I'll be talking to you a lot about how do we actually build democratic structures that can give the people what they want, bring development, bring freedom, bring self-expression, and all of that. Both of you have already talked about how so far we're dealing with historic problems. We did not have the right historic history to lean on to strengthen our democratic institutions. We've talked about capacity of the people of democratic institutions that were left behind. And so these are issues. Now we've detailed some of the foundational problems. That the issue we had was issue of capacity for democratic institutions and the culture of democracy. What can we do now, seeing that we've had a problem of getting deliverables from both military and democratic rules? What can we do to build a culture that can sustain and support democratic systems that will also produce development, not just democracy for namesake, but democracy with the actual results and benefits of democracy?
Well, there are a couple of things that we can do. Like first, the pipeline of leadership. So the people who get to be put in front of the electorate and who we have to make decisions as to which of them will lead us have to, that has to be taken care of, right? That pipeline of leadership. We're not putting our best foot forward. Short term also, we need to have a situation where multilateral institutions on the continent, primarily the African Union and ECOWAS, need to take bolder steps to ensure that democratic traditions or any company right now, any country that's a democracy, right, maintains and upholds, its commitments to remaining so. You have a situation where first with Mali,
all right, sir.
Actually, first with Burkina Faso, then with Mali, and now with Guinea, ECOWAS and the African Union basically acquiesced to the interest and the intentions of the coup plotters. You cannot have a situation like that and not incentivize behavior. The contagion effect of political theory will kick in. If people think that, hey, my neighbor in some other country can get away with toppling the government, I can do so too. And if you look at a map, Guinea is neighbors with Mali, is neighbors with Burkina Faso. So it's you really can make that argument that people are looking at that. And this happened in the 60s and in the 70s, where coups in Benin, coups in Togo, coups in Ghana, and
all right. So Doctor, okay. So this brings me to my next question, Doctor. Now, seeing that this has been the issue, very quickly, ECOWAS came and has suspended the Guinea from all ECOWAS activities and position. So, is this enough? Does ECOWAS and the AU, do they have the bite to incentivize behavior, or is this just another photo ops? If they don't have the bite, what can be done to ensure regional and continental bodies like the AU and ECOWAS can do this? What can be done so that we ensure that this will happen?
Well, basically, for me, it's about the credibility of leadership on the African continent. Generally, whether it is military, and I'm not canvassing for military regimes, or democratic dispensations, there is need for a new orientation. An average person that makes it to the presidency, to the headship of national governments, is there to just amass wealth for himself and his cronies. And for as long as everybody can cut through the dishonesty in governance, you discover that we aren't getting anywhere, which goes back to the point raised earlier on by Barrister Effiong. We need to build strong institutions, and building strong institutions cannot be done only from the angle of politics, of the political. We have to do it from other angles such as the economic and the social, so that there is something systemic. Of course, that is the whole idea of institutions. When you have a democratic government or a military government that, for instance, does not care about social welfare, that does not care about education, that does not care about infrastructure, and so many other things, that creates the impression that it is only people from my region that will benefit. We aren't getting anywhere. We need to return to the whole idea and the ideal of a nation as a place where we build institutions that makes everybody feel they belong.
All right. So, Doctor, if I could understand you, that for you, the more focus should be returning to effective governance, regardless of the model of government or system that we operate. So we get that loud and clear. But for a minute, let's return back to Guinea so we don't forget the immediate cause of our conversation. Which way forward for Guinea? The coup has happened. The constitution has been suspended completely. Military rulers have taken over the various regions. So, Ikeme said, I'm going to ask you this question. What next for Guinea? What's the next step? What can we expect? And what should we ideally do?
Well, I mean, the rest of the region and the international community would evidently compel Guinea to chart a path towards democracy. I think it's a question of when, not if. And Guinea presents very interesting problems because it's a very, even by African standards, the very young democracy. It's just got barely under 11 years of the democratic tradition under it. And so Guinea needs to be basically handheld and really strongly supported by ECOWAS and also by the African Union and also countries like Nigeria, because things are not perfect here, but we don't look like we are going to chart a path towards Guinea anytime soon, which is a positive, right? And also in terms of encouraging the building of strong institutions. And the point to make about strong institutions, again, and Dr. Laura has got this point very well, is this: in every country, there's at least going to be one institution which will always have some legitimacy, and that's the military. And so if the institutional balance of power in any given country isn't tilted in favor of more civilian type institutions or a framework that at least supports those civilian institutions, then you open up the space for the military to get in. And so civil society has an important point and part to play. You've also got corporate organizations, especially African and West African organizations, which need to begin to invest in places like Guinea. They also have a very important point to play because, again, when the economic well-being of the people are taken care of, they generally tend to devolve towards more democratic forms of government. The fact that they are empowered to hold their leaders accountable just puts a lead on any form of autocratic or authoritarian, systems or forms of governance.
Okay, now because of time, we don't have much of it, so I'm going to ask both of you the same questions, and Ikemesi, will start with you. Your final words, African leaders, in a number of these places, the issues that we've had have been issues that related to delivery of democratic dividends, so to speak, the adjustment of the constitution, seeking for third term, and all those kind of things. What do you think, if you're going to be addressing the African leaders, what do you think the African leaders need to do to ensure that on their part, they lay such a foundation that nobody has an excuse to come take over government?
So what Burkina Faso and Mali twice, Mali has had two coups, right, in the last 18 months, and Guinea have shown, and also to a lesser extent, Chad, even though Chad is more in Central Africa than West Africa, is that every West African leader has been put on notice. You cannot be in a situation where you're doing where you have a business as usual type approach and think that your legitimacy is secured. And so for African leaders, a shift has to be made towards a paradigm where the interest of the people, and especially the social and economic well-being of the people, takes primacy over more narrow political considerations. And that really, I think, is the object lesson of Guinea. Condé was an opposition leader. Condé worked in civil society for many years. Condé was jailed for more than a decade before he became president. He got into power, power got into him, and now he's ended up in a situation where he's back under military custody and he's lost, the entire plot, has certainly lost, the guardrails of power in that country. And so what Condé really shows is anyone is fallible. This can happen really to anyone. West Africa is in a situation where you've got countries that have similar human development indicators to Guinea, who could potentially be at risk of entering into this type of situation.
Okay.
And so everyone should sit up and really, study Guinea and learn the lessons. That's
fantastic. Doctor?
Yes, you see, basically for me, African leaders have to become more convincing to their citizens. Imagine that Condé didn't manipulate the constitution to earn or to force a third term on the country. This coup would have been avoidable if Mamadi Doumbouya had toppled a fresh president with a first-term mandate. The response from the people of Guinea would have been different. But because those in power are never sincere with the people, the soldiers can then take advantage of them. So basically, the African leadership has to be more convincing to that extent, whereby even when you try to invite the military to come and take over power, they will say there is really no basis for it.
Yes.
And South Africa is an example. In spite of all the challenges, you are going to discover that it is not likely that the South African military would want to consider a coup, because the system works much better in that place than in any other place, to the extent that even during apartheid, there was a time the South African military was invited to take over, and the generals asked, and what will we be doing? That is talking about what happens when a system works, even in an extreme case as that of apartheid. So, democratic leaders have to be more convincing that they have the interest of the people at heart. At that point, not even the military will think of toppling them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor. And Keme said, thank you. It's been fantastic having you on the show. I'd just like to take what you said again. Very importantly, at this point in time, African leaders need to learn to deliver on the dividends of democracy, of governance, to ensure that there is no platform, there is no excuse, there is no reason why any of these military or any other form of government will come and subvert a democratically elected government. Thank you very much. It's been quite enlightening having you. We hope we'll get you back as we follow this particular issue across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right then.